Hi, this is Trevor Conquergood. Welcome to this week's RNK Software Club's video for the week. And the topic for this week is going to be about creating a cute little happy face patch. And so this is just one way that we have for making patches at Floriani, but it's a really good one. And so we'll make the design and then we'll show you how to make the patch. Are you ready to get started? Okay, let's get going. So if I pop over to my Floriani workspace here, let me just put my picture away. And so here's the photograph of our little finished patch. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with a clip art. So I found an actual vector image of a happy face. And so you can see that I've opened that up on my screen. And if I look in my sequence area, you can see that there's an yellow artwork sort of background shape, and then there is like the black outline and the black eyes and the black mouth on top. And so basically I have all the pieces that I need to create my embroidery design. What I could do is start with the background, right? So essentially the technique that we're going to use for making this patch involves applique. So we're going to applique yellow fabric onto like water dissolving material. And you'll see in the photographs why we would do that, but it gives a perfect edge to your patch, so that the embroidery kind of wraps all the way around your applique. And so essentially I'm going to select that yellow piece just by clicking here in the sequence view. And if I click down at the bottom row for the option for applique, so that's awesome. Basically, the software will make the color stops. If you watch this stitch out right now, it's going to do, here, let's just hide the artwork for a minute. You can see the applique that we've made. It starts with a run stitch. The machine will stop. You'll place your yellow fabric down. It does another run stitch. Now it's going to stop and you trim like around the trim away the excess yellow material, and then you can finish off with a cover stitch. So a couple things that I like to do when I make patches, that's perfect for a regular applique, but when I do my patches, I do like to add some extra underlay to that cover stitch. And there is an option here. See, in this applique has like a whole series of instructions on how you can control in the properties box how it's going to sew out. Well, if I choose sew underlay, then you'll see that this time when it stitches out, so does the run stitch, machine stops, place your yellow fabric, does another run stitch, machine stops, trim your yellow fabric, and then now it does some extra underlay before doing that cover stitch. And so really that's kind of probably enough, but sometimes I like to put extra underlay when I do patches to make sure that this edge is really nice and clean. I might actually put what we call like a contour, underlay. And so there's really, once you've kind of gotten to the settings of the applique, there's not a lot more I could do to add more underlay within this tool. And so what I'm going to do instead is tell it to not sew the underlay and not even sew the finish. So when I click apply, it'll be the applique will just be the first two colors. So all we'll have is the run stitch, machine stops, and then you place your yellow fabric and then the second run stitch. And in fact, while I'm at it, so a couple things we can do here. First of all, let's choose some fabric so that it doesn't show kind of like a blank area. Click on the little button and choose from, different kind of colors. And you can add your own colors to this list, by the way. You click add and then you select your, fabric images. I'll put a yellow back there. It's not the brightest yellow in the world, but it'll work for now. And the idea is it just represents the fabric. It doesn't change the way the design stitches out or anything. It just kind of shows you that that's an applique. But one thing I do want to do, so there's two tabs for applique. This is the applique tab, the main sort of applique tab, but there's another one called applique extra. And applique extra allows us to take control of the placement line and the tack down line. And right now the placement line is set at 2.5 millimeter run stitch. The tack down is set as a 2.5 millimeter run stitch. And what I'm going to do is change it to be a double run. And I like the double run because it gives you a little bit stronger of an edge to trim against when you're, trimming that excess material. So you do your first one, you place your yellow fabric down, and now you do that second one, but it goes round the horn and back again, and so it gives it a double run. So that's great, and that's kind of like the applique component of the design. And remember, in the artwork, there was the whole black color, and there was already a black outline there. If there wasn't, I could just select this applique shape and go copy and paste to make another, version. Because what I'm basically trying to say is now I'm going to take that artwork for the outline. Here I have clicked the eyeball to hide those things for a minute. So now we can see them again. I've clicked on the eyeball again. If I click on that artwork shape, I'll click on the option to make a steel stitch. So now we've converted that into embroidery, and we have sort of like the border of the applique, or like the little patch, is a separate piece. And by doing that, it allows me all of the different control levels that you have on a regular steel stitch. And so in this case, it's the underlay that I really wanted to work with. So if I look in the properties, there's a tab for underlay. And now it doesn't currently have any underlay, and so what I really wanted to do was to have a contour and either a parallel or a zigzag. So parallel kind of goes one layer of the kind of zigs, and then if you do zigzag, it does 2 layers. So here, let me show you. This is the parallel, so let me collect it. We have a contour underlay and a parallel. So if you watch it sew out, let's just zoom out, it'll do your applique background. Now, it'll do the contour underlay first. So see how it traces around the inside and outside of that border? Then it'll do 1 layer of parallels, kind of like a zigzag, a back and forth, before it does the cover stitch. And that's probably enough underlay. It really depends on how wide this border is, because right now I have it set at kind of the default size of 2.5. Well, most times when I do a patch, I use a 3 or a 3.5 for a little bit wider border. And so now it's a little bit more bold, and I think it leaves just a little bit more room for that underlay, so I go with zigzag. And so now if you watch it, it'll do the first run stitch, stop, place your yellow fabric, do the double run, stop, trim your fabric, and now when it does the border, does the contour underlay, does the first layer of the zigzag, the second layer of the zigzag. And if you look right now, before that cover stitch comes around, we've really done a lot to cover up the edge of that patch like that. And now your cover stitch comes and you get a really nice, clean edge to the patch. So basically at this point, we just need to kind of embroider the rest of the design. Let's just select the eyes, and we could use like an auto satin stitch to just convert those into sort of the satin style of embroidery like that. So just click on auto satin. That kind of puts in the inclinations and adds the stitches. And same thing for the mouth down here. It's actually just like a single line, and so a steel stitch works out really good for that too, and we can just give them like a little embroidery mouth. And so essentially I want to select that steel stitch mouth and maybe add some underlay stitches. Underlay stitches are important when you're sewing on top of a piece of fabric like this. That will, at very minimum, I would put a parallel. Again, depending on the width of it, I might add a contour. If there was a layer of embroidery underneath, I would probably add a contour for sure. So yeah, it's up to you when you watch them sew out. The one thing I will say is when you use contour underlay, another thing that helps is to go to the properties box and look for the push-pull tab and add absolute pull compensation, just a little bit, like maybe 0.02 of a millimeter. I know it doesn't sound like much, but watch me click apply. It just makes it a little bit fatter. And I find that that helps it cover up those, underlying stitches. And so we could even do the same thing on the outer border. Just go in, add in like 0.2 or 0.3 pull compensation, and it just helps fatten it up a little bit. So, okay, we've created our embroidery design. You can watch it sew out on screen. Right away I notice, it does the applique, but then it does the eyes before the border. So I think that it would probably be logical after we finished sort of cutting that applique fabric for that outer border to be the next thing that sews. And so I just need to use the sequence tool to move it up, up, and now it's all set. We've got everything kind of in the logical order, and we're ready to create our embroidery design. And so at this point, you're going to say File, Save As, and you're going to save it to your computer in, whatever format you want. And there are dozens of different formats that you can choose for all the different types of embroidery machines. Now, we always save the Floriani WAF file, of course, because there you can put notes in here. This is for a patch. This could say, I don't know if I spelt all that right. I kind of feel like I got a typo in there. Yeah, it's right there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, if I click File and Save As, and I save it as a Floriani WAF file, then even my notes that I've typed in the note file will be here. And really, that's the best file for going back to edit, because it's got all of your original artwork. It's got your instructions, like what kind of underlay you chose. And so that is essentially why we always say keep the Floriani WAF file. And then if you need to make a stitch format, obviously to embroider, our machines don't take WAF, so we have to make a PES or a JEF or a DST or whatever format you want. We can make them all. So, okay, all that said, now I'm going to pop up the pictures. And so these are like photographs of me making the patch. And the first thing I've done, I guess it's two things that you can see in this photo. Step number one is I hooped up Floriani Wet and Gone. And it's quite a thin material, and so I used a little bit of our perfect grip tape just in the edge of the, sort of underneath the hoop like that, to really help my hoop grip that material and make sure that it can't move while we're embroidering on it. So that's the first thing I did, hooped up the Floriani Wet and Gone. And then the second thing I did was, this is my yellow fabric, and I've added a piece of Floriani stitch in shape. The stitch in shape is sort of like a felt, and it really it's fully washable, so it's been added scrim added to it. But basically what this does is makes my yellow fabric nice and stiff and firm, and literally I can pick it up and hold it like a board. And I actually have that piece right here that we cut out, and so you can see just how stiff that really is. So that's why I use the stitch in shape, because it's what gives this patch the kind of nice crisp feeling. Otherwise it would just be really soft like the yellow fabric originally was. So that's my first tip, is to get some of the it's actually called RNK Stitch in Shape, not Floriani, but it's called Stitch in Shape. White roll, I don't know, I want to say 15 inches by, maybe 5 yards or something like that. You'll make a lot of patches if you get a roll of it. So now I'm starting the embroidery, and you can see that I'm on the machine, and we've sewn that first placement line. We've placed our yellow fabric over top of it, and we've sewn that double run stitch. And so it's time to trim the excess yellow material away. And so I use my RNK micro duckbill scissors. They're applique scissors, so that means they have this sort of a bend in the arm here that allows you to work in your embroidery hoop, and the duckbill is good for kind of helping to protect your fabrics and not make sure you don't cut what you don't want to cut. Now, notice I try and trim as close as I can to that run stitch. You could probably even get a little bit closer here, Trevor. Come on, take your time and do a good job. Make it look like the rest of it there, because that's going to basically become the edge of your patch. And so you want to do a nice job trimming it. Trim as close to your run stitch as you can. If you've got the stitch in shape in here, you'll find it's kind of hard to trim close to it, because the stitch in shape is quite strong and stiff. And so just do the best you can. Get a nice clean trim like that. And now when you stitch, here you can see there's that contour run stitch going on either side. There's the parallel underlay going back and forth. And now it's sewing the cover stitch. And really all of that extra underlay helps to make sure that this black cover stitch wraps around that yellow fabric, and you get a nice clean edge to your patch. So now I'm off the machine, and I've cut the patch out of the water dissolving material, and I just left a little bit so you can see that there's a small edge of that wet and gone. And so now all I have to do is kind of get it wet, and I don't usually like to dunk the patch in the water. I'll just wet my finger and touch the edge of the patch, and that'll get rid of all of the wet and gone, and ta-da, you've made yourself a cool little embroidery patch. So that's exactly how it goes. And I hope you enjoyed today's video, you guys. This is Trevor, and I'm from RNK Distributing. Thanks very much for listening, and have a great day.